Good morning. Good morning. I'm very happy to be with you today, and I look forward to our discussions. Our topic today is how to help emerging nations. Today, we see large differences in the wealth of nations across the world. The nations of the developed world have provided financial help to many poor nations, partly through the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. In some cases, the assistance has provided benefits, but in other cases, the help has landed into the hands of a few corrupt leaders, while large numbers of the very poor people receive little help. The Arab Spring brought revolution across North Africa. The Middle East has involved wars since the formation of the modern Israel. Russia has been attacking Ukraine for the last 3 years, and China seeks to expand its reach and acquire Taiwan, a territory which it has never controlled before. More recently, large numbers of immigrants from Central and South America have marched to the United States. Now we see many more immigrants coming to the U.S. from almost every nation on earth. Some nations have been very successful as they develop with the assistance of rich nations. Examples are South Korea and Costa Rica. Other nations have been plagued with graft and corruption, such as Mexico and Venezuela. A case study approach can help us identify the lessons learned in economic development to help us find a better pathway for the future. Most nations strive for economic progress and rising incomes over time. This goal is shared by many families and many business firms. Success in these areas usually leads to happiness and stability, both in the household and in the nation. Failure in these important areas of life can lead to criminal activity, business failures, reduced job opportunities, and eventually revolution. In prehistoric times, tribes and bands of warriors attacked their neighbors to take their wealth and to force some into slavery. In some parts of the world, pirates have captured valuable cargoes and demanded ransom. Over time, the tools of war were improved with the creation of horse cavalry, large ships with cannons, and long-range guns and artillery. World War I started almost by accident, and World War II was conceived and imposed upon a war-weary world in the 1930s. The U.S. entered World War II in 1941. Ultimately, the use of these two nuclear bombs and success in the European theater ended World War II. Over many years, we have seen wide swings in the economic success of nations. Some nations have prospered and others have failed. We have learned from this historical facts that we should be able to understand the causes of economic success and failure. This understanding can help us focus policy leaders on developing better policy for the benefit of all nations. Differences in economic development and the welfare of people are not entirely due to culture or geography. Sometimes the invisible hand, as explained by Adam Smith, is a powerful force that is common characteristic of many successful nations over many centuries. Some examples are described below. Governments that share power and honor the rule of law tend to be more pessimistic over time. Pluralistic institutions are necessary to limit the government's power and to provide mechanisms for citizens to petition their government leaders and participate in the economic life of the nation. England is a good case in point. During the 14th century, the Black Death plague killed many people, leading to a shortage of workers. This shortage of workers then lifted wages and eventually increasing the wages of most workers. England also adopted pluralistic institutions over the next 300 years as they colonized the New World and allowed the Industrial Revolution to spread wealth and new technologies around the world. Major historical events can also play an important role in economic development. In 1588, the British Navy defeated the Spanish Armada. This event led to the rise of the merchant class in England and the growth of the British East India Company all around the world. Korea. North Korea and South Korea provide an excellent case study in economic success and political failure. Prior to World War II, Korea was a homogeneous culture of poor farmers. The economic welfare of Koreans was similar in the North and the South. After the Korean War ground to a stalemate in 1953, Korea was split across the 19th parallel. North Korea fell under the control of the communists in alliance with USSR and China. South Korea allied with the West and adopted an effective free market democracy. Both nations had similar resources and people, but over time, South Korea has prospered and has become a major supplier of automobiles and electronics to the world. North Korea remains fully under the grasp of the Kim family and the Communist Party. Starvation is a daily problem in North Korea. People are not allowed to leave the nation, and those who try are in danger of being shot. To generate foreign reserves, North Korea has developed weapons, possibly nuclear, and drones used by armed forces fighting in the Middle East and in the Ukraine. North Korea has fired intercontinental ballistic missiles into the Pacific Ocean to demonstrate its expertise. However, nighttime satellite photography of South Korea shows brightly lit cities similar to the other cities of the modern world, but images of North Korea show almost no nighttime illumination. We cannot attribute the differences in wealth and productivity to the people, the culture, or the natural resources. The primary difference in the two Koreas is the political control exercised by the government in the North and the existence of free market institutions in the South. Central America. There are additional examples of nations with very similar cultures, geography, and resources that have markedly different incomes and standard of living. Central America is unique in that Costa Rica has a vibrant and free economy, and it is the Latin American nation with the longest history of democracy. Its neighbor, Nicaragua, is governed by the dictator Daniel Ortega. GDP per capita in Costa Rica is about 3 times that in Nicaragua. Economic opportunity rather limited, though, in most Latin America nations, and that is the reason so many people there are trying to settle in the United States. Spain. Another good example is a difference in economic institutions at different times with differing results. Francisco Franco governed Spain as a military dictator from 1936 until he died in 1975. Upon his death, King Juan Carlos was restored to the throne. He adopted a free market system with increased personal freedoms. A new constitution was adopted in 1975, and the parliamentary elections were held. Innovation was encouraged and firms flourished. From 1975 through 2015, per capita income increased by a factor of 10. Real GDP also increased by a factor of 10. Spain enjoyed a large increase in tourism, and the population increased to 46 million people, partly due to increased immigration from across Europe. The Middle Ages and the Black Death. During the 14th century, the Black Death took many lives throughout Europe, and the medical practitioners of the day were not able to control the losses. As many poor workers died, there was a shortage of workers in England, so wages rose. The surviving workers enjoyed more economic power and a rising standard of living. By contrast, in Eastern Europe, the Black Death had a different effect. The landowners there had market power and were able to buy more land and control wages. So as the deaths increased, the falling labor supply met a falling demand for labor, and the surviving workers did not benefit from rising wages. Coincidence and luck can sometimes explain the differences. In 1588, the British Navy was engaged with the Spanish Armada. The British won, paving the way for the British to expand their mercantilist trade to the New World and the colonies of Africa and Asia. However, the reason the British Navy defeated the Spanish Armada was that the Spanish admiral died, and he was replaced by a less effective commander. That situation could have easily turned out another way. Pluralistic institutions and extractive institutions. Pluralistic institutions are those that spread power to more citizens and seek a common agreement as to the goals and activities of the government. An example is the U.S. Congress and presidency, which must compromise to agree on policy moves. Extractive institutions are those that concentrate the power and decision-making in the hands of a few or even one decision maker. An example is the late Fidel Castro in Cuba. Pluralistic institutions or shared power tend to perpetuate themselves in a virtuous cycle as petitions to the government are granted, prompting more petitions. By contrast, extractive institutions tend to concentrate power in the hands of a few, such as the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty in Russia or the numerous emperors in China since 1000 BC. Strong central governments are needed. Nations without a strong central government tend to fail. For example, Afghanistan was secured for 10 years under the control of the Russians, followed by 20 years under the control of the U.S. armed forces, until 2020, when the forces were removed. The Taliban soon took over the nation. Another example is Ethiopia, which has no functioning central government. Congo is another example. Mexico has surrendered much of its countryside to drug lords and to gangs that can prevent the police from even entering their territory. A strong central government is necessary to guarantee public order, property rights, and basic freedoms. Nations without these characteristics are usually the poorest on earth. China is a very special case. After World War II, China fought a brief war with the Chinese nationalists, who were then forced to decamp to Taiwan, where they remain today. Mao Zedong was the dominant leader in China, and he concentrated his power by imposing the Cultural Revolution on the people in 1970s. New leadership after Mao died in 1975, that was Deng Xiaoping, started the process of opening up China to the rest of the world. Since 1980, China has opened to tourists and to firms seeking to invest in and hire Chinese workers. In addition, China has acquired patented trade secrets and used them to speed the development of its own military and civilian firms. For example, China now builds large jet aircraft, which look very similar to Boeing jets. In recent years, China's real GDP has been growing at 8% annually, after a 25-year run of growing only at 12 to 25% annually. Foreign aid to promote economic development. There are many examples of corrupt leaders capturing donated funds to benefit those in power. Another example is President Putin in Russia, who has awarded many valuable management contracts to his friends, some of whom have fell out of favor and are now dead. Colombia is another case in study. The U.S. provided $6 billion to the government led by Mr. Uribe to control illegal drugs and terrorism. However, it now appears that the funds were diverted to target Uribe's political enemies. Mexico and the United States. During 1400 to 1800, the U.S. was, as well as many parts of Central and South America, were colonized by European powers. These areas of the Americas had relatively few native populations, and the technology and weapons were inferior to those of the European colonial powers. Most of the colonizers were seeking gold, silver, and other valuable products. In parts of Central and South America, valuable treasure was found and taken away from the people and shipped back to Europe. In North America, little valuable treasure was found until the fur trade was developed in the North Country. The British colonies in North America struggled to find enough food. The British colonies began to become self-sufficient only after the colonists were granted their own land to develop. Many years later, immigration to North America from Europe increased the population and provided a solid base of economic growth. The colonists in North America were never a source of income to the powers in Europe. The distance across the nation, the ocean, provided some independence to the new colonies, which were mostly allowed to govern themselves and to build up their own economies. By contrast, the European settlers in Central and South America did find gold and silver in the hands of the natives. Much of that valuable cargo was simply taken away and sent back to Europe. In many cases, the natives were forced to work and pay tribute to the Europeans. Some were imprisoned or killed to enforce the European strength or search for valuable treasure. So there was a significant difference in the treatment and role of natives in North America compared to Central and South America. In North America, the natives were never enslaved, and the European colonizers were forced to learn to be self-sufficient. But in the Central and South America, the natives were mistreated and much of the gold and silver was taken. Throughout the Americas, there was little assimilation with the natives. As a result, the colonists in North America set about creating a sound economic base, fueled by continuing immigration from Northern Europe. Self-government was the rule, and strong institutions were created, leading to the U.S. Constitution in 1787. This situation was quite different in Central and South America, where military commanders took over the numerous colonies. The focus was on capturing the gold and silver to be sent back to the home country. As a result, many of the nations in Central and South America gained little experience with constitutional government with limited powers. Latin America. While Costa Rica boasts a democratic government, the other 20 nations in Latin America all have adopted a form of government with limits on the rights of the people and applied central government powers to assist cronies and preserve parties in power. Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, has worked closely with her predecessor to reduce the powers of the judiciary and some government regulators. Organized crime continues to control much of the countryside. Electricity shortages have discouraged some investment by Mexican firms. And Pemex, the government oil monopoly, is poorly staffed and delivers much less oil than it used to. Elsewhere in Latin America, there's widespread trafficking in drugs, many of which are sent to the United States. Examples are Venezuela, Bolivia, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Cuba. In Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro returned to office as president after widespread claims of irregularities in his previous elections. Each of these cases described above provides insights learned over the last 500 years. Often the past years, dominant leaders have been able to gain power and hold it for many years. Many peoples have been subjugated and enslaved. Hopefully progress will continue so that we are more kind to each other and can deliver benefits for all. The universal lesson of governments is that people and of the nations are more likely to prosper and enjoy a rising standard of living when the following standards are in place: freedom of speech and association, freedom of religion, potential for land ownership and private property rights, assurance of public safety, limited government, and shared political powers. Thank you.